Question 1. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in security incidents originating from third-party vendors handling protected health information. To optimize the incident management process for these types of events, which of the following actions best aligns with the principles of the HIPAA security rule and promotes effective response and mitigation? Option A. Prioritize internal system recovery and data restoration without immediately engaging the vendor or initiating notification procedures to minimize operational disruption. Option B. Defer all incident response activities until the third-party vendor completes its internal investigation and provides a comprehensive report to avoid duplicating efforts and ensure a unified approach. Option C. Focus solely on patching the exploited vulnerabilities within the healthcare organization systems, assuming the vendor will manage any data compromise on their end. Option D. Immediately initiate a joint investigation with the vendor to determine the scope and root cause, implement containment measures, and prepare for required notifications to affected individuals and the Department of Health and Human Services based on preliminary findings. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a joint investigation with the vendor to determine the scope and root cause, implement containment measures, and prepare for required notifications to affected individuals and the Department of Health and Human Services based on preliminary findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves managing a security incident that originated with a third-party vendor, introducing complexities in accountability, access control, and communication. The healthcare organization retains ultimate responsibility for protecting patient data, even when that data is handled by external entities. The incident's impact on patient care and the potential for regulatory penalties necessitate a swift, coordinated, and compliant response. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes immediate containment, thorough investigation, and transparent communication, all while adhering to the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, security rule. This involves isolating the affected systems, determining the root cause of the breach with the vendor, assessing the scope of compromised protected health information, and notifying affected individuals and regulatory bodies as required by HIPAA. This proactive and compliant strategy minimizes further harm, fulfills legal obligations, and demonstrates a commitment to patient privacy and data security. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on the third-party vendor to manage the incident without active oversight or independent verification. This fails to meet the healthcare organization's responsibility under HIPAA to ensure the security of PHI, regardless of where it is processed. It also risks overlooking critical details or delaying necessary actions due to potential conflicts of interest or differing priorities of the vendor. Another incorrect approach is to delay notification to affected individuals and the Department of Health and Human Services, CHS, until the investigation is fully complete and all potential liabilities are assessed. HIPAA mandates timely notification of breaches of unsecured PHI. An undue delay can result in significant penalties and erode patient trust. The focus should be on prompt action and communication, with ongoing investigation running concurrently. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on technical remediation without addressing the contractual and procedural gaps that allowed the incident to occur. While technical fixes are crucial, a comprehensive incident response must also involve reviewing and updating vendor agreements, security clauses, and oversight mechanisms to prevent recurrence. This oversight failure can lead to repeated incidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident management framework that clearly defines roles and responsibilities for both internal teams and third-party vendors. This framework should include pre-incident planning, such as robust vendor risk assessments and contractual security requirements, and post-incident procedures that prioritize containment, investigation, notification, and remediation. Decision-making should be guided by a risk-based approach, prioritizing actions that protect patient data and ensure regulatory compliance, with clear escalation paths and communication protocols. Question 2. Market research demonstrates that healthcare organizations are increasingly collaborating with external researchers to advance medical knowledge. A healthcare provider has received a request from a university research team to access de-identified patient data for a study on disease prevalence. The research team has indicated they require the data within 48 hours to meet a grant deadline. The healthcare provider's internal security team is concerned about the potential for re-identification of patients, even with de-identified data, and the lack of a formal business associate agreement, BA, with the university. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for timely research collaboration with the stringent requirements of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, security and privacy rules? Option A. Provide the research team with aggregated statistical summaries of the data, which are inherently de-identified, and inform them that individual patient-level data cannot be shared without a formal BAA in place, which requires a longer onboarding process. Option B. Conduct a risk assessment to determine the appropriate level of de-identification for the requested data, ensuring it meets HIPAA standards, and proceed with data sharing under a research data use agreement that outlines security responsibilities, while initiating the process for a BAA if ongoing data sharing is anticipated. Option C. Refuse to share any data until a full, comprehensive de-identification process is completed, which may take several weeks, to ensure absolute certainty against re-identification, even if it means missing the grant deadline. Option D. Share the raw, unde-identified patient data with the research team immediately, as they are a reputable university, and trust their assurances that they will protect the information. The correct answer is B. Conduct a risk assessment to determine the appropriate level of de-identification for the requested data, ensuring it meets HIPAA standards, and proceed with data sharing under a research data use agreement that outlines security responsibilities, while initiating the process for a BAA if ongoing data sharing is anticipated. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for rapid information sharing to address a potential security incident and the imperative to protect sensitive patient health information. Phi, in accordance with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, security rule. The healthcare organization must balance operational efficiency with its legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach, which involves a risk assessment to determine the appropriate level of de-identification before sharing data with external researchers, represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with HIPAA requirements for safeguarding PHI. Specifically, the HIPAA security rule mandates that covered entities implement administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI. Sharing data without proper de-identification or a business associate agreement, BA, would violate these provisions, potentially leading to significant penalties and reputational damage. The privacy rule also governs the use and disclosure of PHI, requiring appropriate authorization or de-identification for research purposes. An incorrect approach that involves sharing raw patient data directly with external researchers without any form of de-identification, or a BAA, fails to implement necessary technical and administrative safeguards. This constitutes a direct violation of the HIPAA security rules requirements for data protection and the privacy rules stipulations on disclosures of PHI. Such an action would expose the organization to significant risks of a data breach and subsequent regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on verbal assurances from external researchers about data security without any formal agreements or technical controls, is also professionally unacceptable. HIPAA requires documented policies and procedures, as well as contractual obligations, like BAAs, to ensure third-party compliance. Verbal assurances do not constitute the required safeguards and leave the organization vulnerable to breaches and noncompliance. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying the sharing of any data until a comprehensive, lengthy de-identification process is completed, even for low-risk scenarios, might be inefficient but does not inherently violate HIPAA. However, it could be considered professionally suboptimal if it hinders legitimate research that could benefit patient care, provided that a risk-based approach to de-identification is employed. The professional decision-making process should involve a systematic evaluation of the data's sensitivity, the intended use, the recipient's security posture, and the applicable regulatory requirements. This includes understanding the different de-identification methods permitted under HIPAA, e.g., Safe Harbor vs. Expert determination, and applying them judiciously based on a documented risk assessment. Professionals should always prioritize a risk-based approach that balances data utility with robust security and privacy protections, ensuring all actions are documented and justifiable under HIPAA. Question 3. Analysis of a recent unauthorized access incident at a healthcare facility, where a phishing attack led to a potential compromise of patient data, requires a systematic evaluation of its consequences. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory frameworks for assessing the importance of security in healthcare settings following such an event? Option A. Relying on the IT department's initial assessment of the number of affected user accounts to gauge the overall impact of the incident. Option B. Immediately focusing on restoring all affected systems to full operational capacity and documenting the technical steps taken to prevent future phishing attempts. Option C. Prioritizing the investigation of the phishing email's origin and content to understand the attacker's motives without immediately assessing the scope of data exposure. Option D. Conducting a detailed analysis to identify the specific types of protected health information. PHI. Accessed. The number of individuals whose PHI may have been compromised, and the nature of the unauthorized access or disclosure to determine the level of risk to individuals. The correct answer is D. Conducting a detailed analysis to identify the specific types of protected health information. PHI. Accessed. The number of individuals whose PHI may have been compromised, and the nature of the unauthorized access or disclosure to determine the level of risk to individuals. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in healthcare settings, balancing the need for efficient data access to provide quality patient care with the imperative to protect sensitive patient information. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for assessing the impact of a potential security breach, which could have severe consequences for patient privacy, trust, and regulatory standing. Careful judgment is required to prioritize patient safety and data integrity while ensuring operational continuity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core of a security incident's impact. By focusing on identifying the types of protected health information, PHI, potentially compromised, the number of individuals affected, and the nature of the unauthorized access or disclosure, it allows for targeted and compliant response. This aligns with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA breach notification rule, which mandates specific steps for assessing the risk of harm to individuals. A thorough impact assessment is crucial for determining whether a breach notification is required, and for implementing appropriate mitigation strategies to prevent further harm and comply with regulatory obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of the breach, without considering the data's sensitivity, or the number of individuals affected fails to meet regulatory requirements. For instance, ignoring the type of PHI involved could lead to underestimating the potential harm, thus violating the spirit and letter of HIPAA. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate system restoration over assessing the scope of the breach risks overlooking critical information about who was affected and what data was compromised. This could lead to inadequate notification or remediation efforts, exposing the organization to significant penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or assumptions about the breach's impact, rather than a systematic assessment, is inherently flawed. It lacks the rigor required by regulations and can lead to misinformed decisions, potentially exacerbating the consequences of the breach. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with immediate containment of the incident, followed by a systematic impact assessment. This assessment should involve a multidisciplinary team, including IT security, legal counsel, compliance officers, and relevant clinical staff. The framework should guide the team to gather all available facts, analyze the potential harm to individuals, and determine the appropriate course of action based on regulatory requirements and ethical considerations. This proactive and thorough approach ensures that the organization responds effectively, minimizes harm, and maintains compliance. Question 4. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the organization's incident response team is struggling to consistently and accurately determine when a security incident involving protected health information, PHI, constitutes a reportable breach under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, breach notification rule. This is leading to either premature and unnecessary notifications or delays in reporting potential breaches. Which of the following approaches best addresses this implementation challenge while ensuring regulatory compliance and protecting patient trust? Option A. Focus solely on the number of patient records potentially affected by an incident when deciding whether to notify, without considering other factors outlined in the HIPAA breach notification rule. Option B. Delay all notification and investigation activities until every single technical detail of the incident is definitively confirmed, even if it means exceeding the 60-day reporting deadline. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for every suspected incident involving PHI to determine if a breach has occurred, considering the nature and extent of the PHI, the unauthorized person, and the likelihood of compromise, before proceeding with notification. Option D. Immediately initiate the full breach notification process for any incident where there is even a remote possibility of unauthorized access to PHI, regardless of a formal risk assessment. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate the full breach notification process for any incident where there is even a remote possibility of unauthorized access to PHI, regardless of a formal risk assessment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in healthcare security, balancing the need for timely and accurate incident response with the complexities of regulatory compliance, specifically the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA breach notification rule. The challenge lies in the potential for misclassifying a security incident as a breach, leading to unnecessary notification burdens and potential reputational damage, or conversely, failing to identify a true breach, resulting in significant penalties and loss of patient trust. The pressure to act quickly, coupled with the ambiguity of initial incident details, requires careful judgment and adherence to established protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a systematic, evidence-based assessment of the incident to determine if a breach has occurred according to HIPAA definitions. This involves a thorough risk assessment that considers the nature and extent of the protected health information. Involved. The unauthorized person who used or to whom the disclosure was made, whether the PHI was actually acquired or viewed, and the extent to which the risk to the PHI has been mitigated. This aligns directly with the requirements of the HIPAA breach notification rule, which mandates notification only when a breach of unsecured PHI is presumed to have occurred, and provides a framework for determining this presumption through a risk assessment. This approach prioritizes compliance, patient privacy, and efficient resource allocation by avoiding premature or unnecessary notifications. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately initiating the full breach notification process upon any suspected unauthorized access to PHI. This fails to adhere to the HIPAA breach notification rule's requirement for a risk assessment to determine if a breach has actually occurred. It can lead to unnecessary panic, wasted resources, and erosion of trust if the incident is later determined not to be a reportable breach. Another incorrect approach is to delay any notification or internal investigation until all technical details of the incident are definitively confirmed. This risks exceeding the 60-day notification deadline stipulated by HIPAA if a breach is indeed identified, leading to regulatory penalties. It also demonstrates a lack of proactive security posture and a failure to protect patient data in a timely manner. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the volume of data potentially accessed rather than conducting a comprehensive risk assessment. HIPAA rule focuses on the likelihood of compromise, not just the quantity of data, ignoring factors like encryption status, the sensitivity of the PHI, and the intent of the unauthorized party can lead to misclassification and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a phased incident response plan that includes initial containment, investigation, and a formal risk assessment to determine reportability under HIPAA. This process should involve designated personnel with expertise in security, privacy, and legal matters. Documentation of each step, including the risk assessment findings and the rationale for any notification decision, is crucial for demonstrating compliance and for future audits. When in doubt, consulting with legal counsel specializing in healthcare privacy is a prudent step. Question 5. Market research demonstrates that healthcare organizations are increasingly adopting advanced EHR systems to improve patient care coordination and operational efficiency. A healthcare provider is evaluating strategies to enhance the security of its EHR system, which contains sensitive patient data. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and industry best practices for EHR security? Option A. Grant all clinical staff full read and write access to all patient records to ensure immediate access for emergent situations. Option B. Schedule security updates and patches for the EHR system only when critical vulnerabilities are publicly disclosed. Option C. Implement robust role-based access controls, conduct regular security awareness training for all staff, and maintain comprehensive audit trails of EHR access and modifications. Option D. Rely primarily on network firewalls and antivirus software to protect the EHR system from external threats. The correct answer is C. Implement robust role-based access controls, conduct regular security awareness training for all staff, and maintain comprehensive audit trails of EHR access and modifications. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for data access for patient care with the stringent requirements for protecting electronic health record (EHR) security under U.S. federal law, specifically the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPAA) security rule. The core tension lies in ensuring authorized access while preventing unauthorized disclosure, modification, or destruction of protected health information. Careful judgment is required to implement security measures that are both effective and practical within a healthcare setting. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the HIPAA security rules mandate for administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. Implementing role-based access controls ensures that individuals only have access to the minimum necessary PHI to perform their job functions, a key principle of HIPAA. Regular security awareness training for all staff is crucial for mitigating human error and insider threats, which are significant risks to EHR security. Furthermore, maintaining audit trails provides accountability and allows for the detection and investigation of security incidents, aligning with HIPAA requirements for security incident procedures and information system activity reviews. This comprehensive strategy proactively addresses multiple facets of EHR security. An incorrect approach that prioritizes convenience over security by granting broad access to EHRs without granular controls fails to meet the minimum necessary standard mandated by HIPAA. This significantly increases the risk of unauthorized access and disclosure of PHI, leading to potential breaches and violations. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on perimeter security, such as firewalls, without addressing internal access controls and user authentication, leaves EHRs vulnerable to insider threats and compromised credentials. This neglects the technical safeguard requirements for access control and audit controls under HIPAA. An approach that delays or neglects regular security updates and patching of EHR systems creates exploitable vulnerabilities, directly contravening the HIPAA security rules requirement for technical safeguards to protect against reasonably anticipated threats or hazards to the security or integrity of PHI. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities to EHRs, assessing the likelihood and impact of those threats, and then implementing appropriate safeguards. This framework should be guided by regulatory requirements like HIPAA, industry best practices, and the specific context of the healthcare organization. Regular review and updating of security policies and procedures are essential to adapt to evolving threats and technological advancements. Question 6. Research into the implementation of a new access control system for a healthcare facility reveals several potential approaches. Considering the paramount importance of protecting patient-protected health information, and adhering strictly to the regulatory framework for the Healthcare Security Certification, CHS, exam, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory mandates? Option A. Implementing a single-factor authentication system using only unique user ID and passwords for all access to PHI, as this is the most straightforward and least disruptive method for clinical staff. Option B. Implementing a multi-factor authentication system that requires a unique user ID, password, and a biometric scan for access to all systems containing PHI, after conducting a thorough risk assessment involving IT security, compliance officers, and clinical department heads to ensure the system's effectiveness and usability within the healthcare workflow. Option C. Selecting the least expensive access control solution that meets the minimum compliance requirements, prioritizing cost savings to allocate more resources to direct patient care. Option D, deploying the most technologically advanced access control system available on the market, regardless of its complexity or integration challenges, to ensure the highest level of security for all digital assets. The correct answer is B, implementing a multi-factor authentication system that requires a unique user ID, password, and a biometric scan for access to all systems containing PHI. After conducting a thorough risk assessment involving IT security, compliance officers, and clinical department heads to ensure the system's effectiveness and usability within the healthcare workflow. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance patient privacy, data security, and operational efficiency within a healthcare setting governed by specific regulations. The introduction of a new access control system requires careful consideration of how it impacts the protected health information, PHI of patients, and the compliance obligations of the healthcare organization. The core of the challenge lies in selecting an access control methodology that is both robust in its security posture and practical for daily use by authorized personnel, all while adhering strictly to the specified regulatory framework for the Healthcare Security Certification, CHS, exam. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based assessment tailored to the specific environment and the types of PHI being protected. This aligns with the fundamental principles of healthcare security and privacy regulations, which mandate that security measures be appropriate to the level of risk. By involving key stakeholders, including IT security, compliance officers, and clinical staff, the organization ensures that the chosen system not only meets technical security requirements, but also supports clinical workflows and patient care delivery without undue burden. This comprehensive evaluation process is essential for maintaining compliance and safeguarding PHI effectively. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most advanced technological features without considering the practical implications for healthcare operations would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of understanding of the operational realities of a healthcare environment and could lead to a system that is either too cumbersome to use, thereby encouraging workarounds that compromise security, or that fails to adequately protect PHI due to misconfiguration or insufficient user training. Such an approach would likely violate regulatory requirements for implementing appropriate safeguards and conducting risk assessments. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings above all else, potentially leading to the selection of a less secure or less comprehensive system, would also be professionally unacceptable. Healthcare organizations have a legal and ethical obligation to protect patient data, and compromising security for financial reasons is a direct violation of this duty. This approach would fail to meet the appropriateness standard for security measures and could expose the organization to significant breaches, regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. This involves identifying all relevant requirements concerning access control, data protection, and risk management. Next, a comprehensive risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the healthcare organization's environment and the PHI it handles. This assessment should inform the selection criteria for any new access control system. Subsequently, a comparative analysis of potential systems should be performed, evaluating them against the identified risks, regulatory requirements, operational needs, and cost-effectiveness. Finally, the chosen system should be implemented with robust policies, procedures, and ongoing training for all users, along with regular monitoring and auditing to ensure continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that analyzing aggregated patient data from electronic health records can significantly improve diagnostic accuracy for rare conditions. A healthcare organization is considering implementing a new AI-driven platform that would process this data for ongoing quality improvement and potential future research. But the platform's developers require access to a substantial dataset for initial training and validation. The organization's leadership is debating whether to proceed with data extraction and analysis for this platform without obtaining explicit, individual patient consent for this specific secondary use, arguing that the potential benefits to future patients outweigh the privacy concerns. What is the most appropriate course of action for the healthcare organization to take regarding the use of patient data for the AI platform? Option A. Proceed with extracting and analyzing the data, relying on the general consent forms patients signed upon admission, as these cover the use of data for healthcare operations and improvement. Option B. Utilize the data for the AI platform's training and validation, as the potential for improved diagnostic accuracy for rare conditions serves the greater good and justifies bypassing individual consent. Option C. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each patient whose data will be used for the AI platform's training and validation, clearly outlining the purpose and potential risks and benefits. Option D. Anonymize the patient data to a degree that prevents re-identification, and then proceed with the analysis, as anonymized data does not require individual consent. The correct answer is C. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each patient whose data will be used for the AI platform's training and validation, clearly outlining the purpose and potential risks and benefits. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the perceived benefit of a new technology against the fundamental patient right to privacy and control over their health information. Healthcare professionals are ethically and legally bound to protect patient data, but also to provide the best possible care. The dilemma arises when a potential improvement in care delivery might involve the use of patient data in a way that could be perceived as intrusive or without explicit, informed consent for that specific use. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of patient rights under relevant healthcare regulations and ethical principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes obtaining explicit, informed consent from patients before their data is used for any purpose beyond direct treatment, payment, or healthcare operations, as mandated by regulations like HIPAA in the U.S. This approach upholds the patient's right to privacy, autonomy, and control over their protected health information. 5. It ensures transparency and builds trust, which are cornerstones of the patient-provider relationship. Obtaining consent for secondary use of data, even for research or quality improvement, is a critical safeguard. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the data analysis without explicit consent, assuming that the potential benefits to patient care justify the action. This directly violates patient privacy rights and regulatory requirements concerning the use and disclosure of PHI. It bypasses the patient's autonomy and right to decide how their information is used, potentially leading to legal penalties and erosion of patient trust. Another incorrect approach is to rely on a broad, general consent form signed at admission that may not specifically cover the intended secondary use of data for market research or technology development. Such general consent is often insufficient for uses outside of direct patient care and may not meet the specificity required for informed consent under privacy laws. This approach fails to adequately inform patients about how their data will be utilized and does not provide them with a meaningful opportunity to object. A third incorrect approach might be to anonymize the data and proceed without consent, believing that de-identification negates the need for patient authorization. While anonymization is a valuable privacy protection technique, the definition of de-identified is often strictly regulated. If the data, even after anonymization, could still be linked back to an individual, or if the process does not meet regulatory standards for de-identification, using it without consent would still be a violation. Furthermore, the ethical principle of respecting patient autonomy extends beyond mere legal compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should first consult relevant regulations, e.g., HIPAA in the U.S., and institutional policies regarding patient privacy and data use. They should then engage in a process of ethical deliberation, considering the principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. The decision-making framework should involve 1. Identifying the core ethical and legal obligations. 2. Evaluating the potential benefits and risks to patients and the organization. 3. Seeking guidance from legal counsel, ethics committees, or privacy officers. 4. Prioritizing patient rights and informed consent above all else when there is ambiguity or potential for harm. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to safeguarding protected health information. 5. Considering the regulatory framework for healthcare security, which of the following encryption and data protection techniques best optimizes the security posture while ensuring compliance? Option A. relying on basic password protection for access to PHI databases and systems, with no additional encryption measures. Option B, employing encryption solely for data in transit, assuming data at rest is adequately protected by access controls. Option C, implementing end-to-end encryption for all PHI, both at rest and in transit. Option D, utilizing encryption only for PHI that is transmitted to external third-party vendors. The correct answer is C, implementing end-to-end encryption for all PHI, both at rest and in transit. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing robust data protection with the operational needs of a healthcare organization. The sensitive nature of protected health information, PHI, necessitates stringent security measures, but overly complex or poorly implemented encryption can hinder legitimate access for patient care, leading to delays and potential harm. The challenge lies in selecting and implementing encryption strategies that are both compliant with healthcare regulations and practically effective. Correct approach analysis. Implementing end-to-end encryption for all PHI, both at rest and in transit, represents best professional practice. This approach aligns directly with the principles of data minimization and security, mandated by healthcare regulations such as HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. In the United States, HIPAA security rule requires covered entities to implement appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI. End-to-end encryption ensures that PHI is unreadable to unauthorized parties throughout its lifecycle, from creation to storage and transmission, thereby significantly reducing the risk of data breaches and unauthorized disclosure. This proactive measure is a cornerstone of maintaining patient trust and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing encryption only for data in transit, while a necessary component, is insufficient on its own. This approach fails to adequately protect PHI when it is stored on servers, workstations, or mobile devices. Data at rest. A breach of a device or server could expose unencrypted PHI, violating regulatory requirements for comprehensive data protection. Utilizing only basic password protection for access to PHI databases and systems is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Password protection alone is a weak technical safeguard and does not constitute encryption. It is highly susceptible to brute force attacks, credential stuffing, and social engineering, leaving PHI vulnerable to unauthorized access and disclosure, which directly contravenes the intent and explicit requirements of healthcare data protection laws. Employing encryption solely for data that is externally shared, such as with third-party vendors, overlooks the substantial risks associated with internal data handling. PHI is equally vulnerable to internal threats, accidental disclosures, or breaches originating from within the organization. Failing to encrypt PHI internally leaves a critical gap in the security posture, exposing the organization to significant compliance violations and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach encryption and data protection by first understanding the specific regulatory landscape governing their jurisdiction, e.g., HIPAA in the U.S. This involves conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify all points where PHI is created, stored, transmitted, and processed. Based on this assessment, a layered security strategy should be developed, prioritizing comprehensive encryption for PHI both at rest and in transit. Regular review and updates to encryption policies and technologies are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Decision-making should always prioritize patient privacy and data security, ensuring that implemented measures are effective, auditable, and do not unduly impede legitimate access for patient care. Question 9. Which approach would be most appropriate for a healthcare security officer who suspects unauthorized access to a patient's electronic health record, AIR, but is unsure if the access was legitimate or a breach? Option A. Inform the patient directly about the suspected unauthorized access and ask them to provide details about their recent EHR activity. Option B. Wait for the patient to report a privacy concern before investigating, to avoid potential overreach and privacy violations. Option C. Immediately access the patient's full EHR to review all activity logs and identify the source of the suspected unauthorized access. Option D. Initiate a formal incident response protocol, notifying the designated privacy officer and IT security team to conduct a joint, authorized investigation according to established procedures. The correct answer is C. Immediately access the patient's full EHR to review all activity logs and identify the source of the suspected unauthorized access. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining patient privacy, a cornerstone of healthcare security, and the immediate need to address a potential security breach. Security personnel's responsibility is to protect both patient data and the physical and digital infrastructure of the healthcare facility. Navigating this requires a delicate balance, ensuring that actions taken to investigate a potential breach do not themselves violate established privacy regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, authorized, and privacy-conscious investigation. This aligns with the core principles of healthcare security, which mandate adherence to regulations like HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, in the U.S., emphasizing the protection of protected health information. 5. By involving the designated privacy officer and following established incident response protocols, the security team ensures that any access to patient data during the investigation is justified, documented, and minimized, thereby upholding legal and ethical obligations. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unauthorized access to patient records for investigation purposes is professionally unacceptable. This directly violates HIPAA privacy rule, which strictly governs the use and disclosure of PHI. Such an action would constitute a breach of patient confidentiality, potentially leading to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of patient trust. Another incorrect approach, delaying the investigation due to fear of privacy violations, is also professionally unsound. While privacy is paramount, a failure to promptly investigate potential security threats could lead to more significant data breaches, compromising a larger volume of PHI and potentially endangering patient safety. This inaction would also contravene the security team's duty to protect the organization's assets and data. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the potential threat. This is followed by consulting established incident response plans and relevant regulatory guidelines. Crucially, before taking any action that might involve sensitive data, consultation with the organization's privacy officer or legal counsel is essential to ensure compliance. The process should always aim to balance security needs with privacy rights, seeking the least intrusive yet effective means to resolve the issue. Question 10. The review process indicates a recent increase in unauthorized access attempts to patient records by internal staff. As the designated security officer for a U.S.-based healthcare organization, what is the most effective and compliant strategy to mitigate this insider threat risk? Option A. Implement a comprehensive program that includes enhanced access controls based on the principle of least privilege, regular security awareness training for all staff, and robust audit logging with proactive monitoring for suspicious activity. Option B. Immediately deploy widespread surveillance technology across all workstations and common areas, with a policy of monitoring all employee communications and internet activity without prior notification. Option C. Revoke all remote access privileges for all employees and require in-person authentication for any access to patient data, regardless of role or necessity. Option D. Focus solely on developing a strict disciplinary policy that outlines severe penalties for any unauthorized access, to be enforced only after an incident is confirmed. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive program that includes enhanced access controls based on the principle of least privilege, regular security awareness training for all staff, and robust audit logging with proactive monitoring for suspicious activity. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for robust security measures against the potential for alienating or unfairly targeting employees. Healthcare environment, governed by strict regulations like HIPAA in the U.S., demands a proactive approach to insider threats while upholding employee privacy and trust. Careful judgment is required to implement effective mitigation strategies that are both compliant and ethically sound. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on a multi-layered strategy that addresses both technical and human elements of insider threat mitigation. This approach aligns with the principles of least privilege, robust access controls, and continuous monitoring, all of which are foundational to protecting protected health information, FI under HIPAA. Furthermore, it emphasizes employee education and awareness, which is a critical component of a comprehensive security program and a proactive measure to prevent unintentional breaches. This holistic strategy is more effective and less likely to create a hostile work environment than purely punitive or overly restrictive measures. An incorrect approach that relies solely on extensive surveillance without clear justification or employee notification would likely violate privacy regulations and ethical guidelines. It could foster an environment of distrust, leading to decreased morale and productivity, and potentially even encourage more sophisticated evasion tactics by malicious insiders. This approach fails to address the root causes of insider threats, such as lack of training or disgruntlement, and focuses on detection rather than prevention. Another incorrect approach that involves broad, indiscriminate access revocation for all employees would be operationally disruptive and counterproductive. It fails to differentiate between roles and responsibilities, hindering legitimate access to PHI necessary for patient care. This approach is not only inefficient, but also demonstrates a lack of understanding of the operational realities of a healthcare organization, and would likely lead to significant workflow disruptions and patient care delays, potentially violating the spirit of HIPAA security rule, which requires appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. A third incorrect approach that focuses solely on reactive disciplinary action after a breach occurs is insufficient as a mitigation strategy. While disciplinary action is a necessary component of incident response, it does not prevent insider threats from occurring in the first place. A proactive and preventative stance, encompassing policy, training, and technical controls, is essential for effective insider threat mitigation. Relying solely on reactive measures leaves the organization vulnerable to repeated incidents and significant harm. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough risk assessment to identify potential insider threats and their impact. This should be followed by the development and implementation of a comprehensive security program that includes technical controls, access management, encryption, monitoring, administrative controls, policies, procedures, training, and physical controls. Regular review and updates to these controls, based on evolving threats and organizational needs, are crucial. Employee engagement and education should be an ongoing process, fostering a culture of security awareness. When incidents do occur, a fair and consistent disciplinary process should be applied, but the primary focus should remain on prevention and early detection. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a healthcare organization's IT department was notified of an employee's termination at 4:00 p.m. on a Friday. The employee's access to the electronic health record, AIR system, was revoked by 5:00 p.m. that same day. However, their access to the facility's internal network, email, and a specialized patient billing portal remained active until Monday morning when the IT department performed a routine system review. Which of the following actions best reflects the organization's adherence to termination procedures and access revocation requirements under the Healthcare Security Certification, CHS, framework, assuming CHS aligns with U.S. federal healthcare regulations? Option A. The organization's actions are acceptable as the critical EHR system access was revoked promptly, and the remaining access was deactivated before any potential misuse was identified. Option B. The organization's actions are acceptable as long as the employee's credentials were disabled in the primary HR system, which would eventually cascade to other systems. Option C. The organization's actions demonstrate a failure to implement a comprehensive and timely access revocation process, potentially exposing protected health information to unauthorized access. Option D. The organization's actions are acceptable because the employee's termination occurred on a Friday, and IT departments are typically given until the next business day to complete all revocation tasks. The correct answer is C. The organization's actions demonstrate a failure to implement a comprehensive and timely access revocation process, potentially exposing protected health information to unauthorized access. Explanation: the analysis reveals a common yet critical challenge in healthcare security, ensuring timely and complete access revocation upon an employee's termination. This scenario is professionally challenging because a lapse in this process can lead to unauthorized access to sensitive patient health information, violating patient privacy, and potentially leading to significant legal and financial repercussions for the healthcare organization. The speed and thoroughness of access revocation are paramount, requiring robust policies and diligent execution. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes immediate and comprehensive deactivation of all system access. This aligns directly with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA security rule, specifically the provisions concerning access control and termination procedures. HIPAA mandates that covered entities implement policies and procedures to restrict and control electronic access to protected health information. Prompt revocation of access upon termination is a fundamental safeguard against impermissible disclosure and unauthorized use of PHI. This approach ensures that the risk of data breach is minimized from the moment the employment relationship ends. An incorrect approach that involves a delayed revocation of access is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes HIPAA requirement for timely access control. Such a delay creates a window of opportunity for a disgruntled or unauthorized former employee to access and potentially misuse PHI, leading to violations of patient privacy and breaches of confidentiality. This also exposes the organization to potential fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which is to revoke access only to specific systems without a comprehensive audit of all access points, is also professionally unacceptable. This incomplete revocation process leaves residual access vulnerabilities. The former employee might still retain access to critical systems or data repositories, even if their primary access is removed. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to implement a complete security lifecycle management process, which is essential for maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of PHI as required by HIPAA. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear, documented, and automated process for employee termination that includes immediate access revocation across all systems and applications. This process should be integrated with the Human Resources Termination Protocol. Regular audits of access logs and user accounts, especially following terminations, are crucial to verify the effectiveness of revocation procedures. Furthermore, ongoing training for IT and security staff on the importance of timely and complete access revocation and the specific requirements of HIPAA is essential. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that a healthcare organization is planning to implement a new telehealth platform to expand remote patient care services. The organization has identified potential cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities associated with such platforms, including unauthorized access, data interception, and malware. To ensure compliance with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and protect protected health information, FI. What is the most appropriate approach to address these cybersecurity risks before and during the platform's deployment? Option A. Prioritize the operational benefits and cost savings of the new telehealth platform and address cybersecurity concerns only if a security incident occurs after the platform is fully operational. Option B. Proceed with the implementation of the telehealth platform using standard, widely available cybersecurity software and protocols, assuming that these general measures will adequately protect PHI. Option C. Implement the telehealth platform with minimal security configurations, focusing on user convenience and rapid deployment, with the intention of enhancing security measures in future updates. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the telehealth platform and its integration with existing systems, and develop a risk management plan to implement appropriate security safeguards. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify, analyze, and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the telehealth platform and its integration with existing systems, and develop a risk management plan to implement appropriate security safeguards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a healthcare organization to balance the imperative of protecting sensitive patient health information, FI, with the operational necessity of adopting new technologies to improve patient care. The rapid evolution of cybersecurity threats means that vulnerabilities can emerge quickly, and a reactive approach can lead to significant breaches, regulatory penalties, and erosion of patient trust. The pressure to innovate in healthcare delivery often clashes with the stringent security requirements mandated by regulations like HIPAA. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment process. This aligns directly with the requirements of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, security rule, specifically the provisions for risk analysis and risk management. A thorough risk assessment identifies potential vulnerabilities associated with the new telehealth platform, evaluates the likelihood and impact of threats exploiting those vulnerabilities, and prioritizes mitigation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that security controls are implemented based on the specific risks to PHI, demonstrating due diligence and compliance with regulatory mandates to protect ePHI. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the telehealth platform without a formal risk assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates HIPAA requirement for a risk analysis, which is a foundational element of a compliant security program. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential harm to patients whose PHI could be compromised. Deploying the platform with only basic, off-the-shelf security measures without a tailored assessment is also problematic. While some security is better than none, it fails to address the unique vulnerabilities and threat landscape specific to the organization and the new technology. This can lead to overlooking critical risks that a comprehensive assessment would uncover, potentially resulting in a breach and non-compliance with HIPAA mandate for appropriate security safeguards. Focusing solely on the cost-effectiveness of the telehealth platform without adequately considering its security implications is an ethical and regulatory misstep. While financial considerations are important, they cannot supersede the legal and ethical obligation to protect PHI. This approach prioritizes business objectives over patient privacy and security, which is a direct contravention of HIPAA core principles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based security framework. This involves 1. Identifying assets, e.g., the telehealth platform itself. 2. Identifying threats, e.g., ransomware, phishing, insider threats. 3. Identifying vulnerabilities, e.g., unpatched software, weak access controls, insecure configurations. 4. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of threats exploiting vulnerabilities. 5. Prioritizing risks based on this analysis. 6. Implementing appropriate security controls to mitigate identified risks. 7. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment and security program. This iterative process ensures that security efforts are focused, effective, and compliant with regulatory requirements like HIPAA. Question 13. Regulatory review indicates that a healthcare organization's security information and event management (SIEM) system is experiencing a significant increase in data volume due to the expansion of its digital services. The security team is considering several approaches to manage this growth and ensure continued effectiveness. Which approach best aligns with healthcare security regulations and best practices for SIEM implementation? Option A. Prioritize logging of user activity data over system-level security events to gain deeper insights into user behavior, even if it means reducing the granularity of network traffic logging. Option B. Focus on logging only events directly related to security controls and known threat indicators, while implementing strict access controls to the SIEM data and establishing clear data retention and disposal policies based on regulatory requirements. Option C. Implement a policy to log all system events across all servers and applications, regardless of their direct relevance to security, to ensure no potential indicator of compromise is missed. Option D. Increase the storage capacity of the SIEM system to accommodate all incoming data without modifying current logging configurations, assuming that more data will inherently lead to better security. The correct answer is C. Implement a policy to log all system events across all servers and applications, regardless of their direct relevance to security, to ensure no potential indicator of compromise is missed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance the operational efficiency of a security information and event management SIEM system with the stringent requirements for patient data privacy and security mandated by healthcare regulations. The rapid growth of data volume and the complexity of threat landscapes necessitate a proactive and compliant approach to SIEM configuration and management. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the SIEM effectively detects and responds to security incidents without inadvertently compromising protected health information. 5. Or violating privacy laws. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a risk-based methodology aligned with regulatory mandates. By focusing on the identification and logging of events directly relevant to security and privacy, and by implementing appropriate access controls and data retention policies, the organization adheres to the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation. This ensures that the SIEM serves its intended security function while respecting patient confidentiality and complying with regulations that govern the handling of sensitive health data. An incorrect approach that involves logging all system events indiscriminately, without regard for relevance or privacy, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This broad logging can lead to the unnecessary collection and storage of PHI, increasing the risk of breaches and violating principles of data minimization. Furthermore, it can overwhelm the SIEM analytical capabilities, hindering the detection of genuine security threats. Another incorrect approach that neglects to implement granular access controls for SIEM data creates a substantial risk of unauthorized access to sensitive information, directly contravening regulations that mandate the protection of PHI. Failing to establish clear data retention and disposal policies also poses a regulatory risk, as it can lead to the indefinite storage of data beyond its necessary retention period, increasing liability and the potential for misuse. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of applicable healthcare security regulations. This involves identifying specific requirements related to data logging, access control, data retention, and incident response. The next step is to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to understand the potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with the SIEM system and the data it processes. Based on this assessment, a strategy should be developed that prioritizes the logging of security-relevant events, implements robust access controls, and establishes clear data lifecycle management policies. Regular audits and reviews of the SIEM configuration and logs are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 14. During the evaluation of a potential data breach involving patient health information, a healthcare organization's IT security team identifies suspicious activity on a server containing electronic health records. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure compliance with healthcare laws and regulations? Option A. Initiate a thorough internal investigation to determine the scope and nature of the breach before taking any external action. Option B. Isolate the affected server and attempt to remediate the security vulnerability without involving external parties. Option C. Activate the organization's incident response plan, which includes engaging legal counsel and the designated privacy officer to guide the subsequent steps. Option D. Immediately notify all affected patients and the relevant regulatory bodies about the suspected breach. The correct answer is D. Immediately notify all affected patients and the relevant regulatory bodies about the suspected breach. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for patient care with the stringent requirements of healthcare data privacy regulations. A healthcare organization must act swiftly to address a potential security breach, while ensuring that its response does not inadvertently violate patient confidentiality or other legal obligations. Careful judgment is required to navigate the complex interplay between incident response protocols and regulatory compliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, compliant, and transparent response. By immediately engaging the designated incident response team and adhering to established protocols that include legal counsel and regulatory notification timelines, the organization demonstrates a commitment to both patient safety and legal obligations. This proactive and structured method minimizes potential harm, ensures accountability, and aligns with the principles of data stewardship and regulatory adherence mandated by healthcare laws. An incorrect approach that involves immediate public disclosure without proper investigation or legal review is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a violation of data breach notification laws, which typically require specific timelines and content for disclosures, and can lead to significant penalties. Furthermore, it risks misinforming the public, causing undue panic, and potentially compromising the ongoing investigation. Another incorrect approach such as delaying notification to regulatory bodies or affected individuals until a full, exhaustive investigation is complete, is also professionally unacceptable. Many regulations have strict deadlines for reporting breaches, and failure to meet these deadlines can result in fines and reputational damage. This delay can also hinder the ability of affected individuals to take protective measures against identity theft or fraud. A third incorrect approach, which involves attempting to contain the breach internally without involving external legal counsel or cybersecurity experts, is professionally unsound. This can lead to an incomplete understanding of the breach's scope and impact, potentially missing critical vulnerabilities, or failing to implement adequate remediation. It also bypasses the necessary legal and regulatory guidance required for proper incident response, increasing the risk of non-compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's incident response plan, immediate activation of the plan upon suspicion of a breach, and consultation with legal and compliance officers. Professionals should prioritize a phased approach: initial assessment and containment, thorough investigation, legal and regulatory review, appropriate notification, and remediation. Maintaining clear documentation throughout the process is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that the healthcare organization's background check process for new clinical hires has been inconsistent, with some applicants undergoing more thorough checks than others, raising concerns about potential patient safety risks and compliance with hiring regulations. Which of the following actions best addresses these audit findings? Option A. Focus solely on criminal background checks for all clinical positions, as this is the most direct indicator of potential risk to patient safety. Option B. Immediately cease all background checks for new clinical hires until a new, more streamlined process can be developed to avoid further compliance issues. Option C. Implement a standardized, multi-layered background screening protocol for all clinical positions that includes verification of professional licenses, criminal history checks, and review of any disciplinary actions from relevant licensing boards, ensuring all checks are conducted in accordance with applicable federal and state healthcare employment laws. Option D. Rely on the hiring manager's personal assessment and references for all clinical hires, as they are best positioned to judge an applicant's suitability. The correct answer is C. Implement a standardized, multi-layered background screening protocol for all clinical positions that includes verification of professional licenses, criminal history checks, and review of any disciplinary actions from relevant licensing boards, ensuring all checks are conducted in accordance with applicable federal and state healthcare employment laws. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential gap in the healthcare organization's background check process for newly hired clinical staff. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the organization's need to maintain a safe and secure patient environment with the legal and ethical obligations to protect applicant privacy and ensure fair hiring practices. The tension lies in identifying individuals who may pose a risk to patient safety without unfairly discriminating against applicants or violating their rights. Careful judgment is required to implement a process that is both effective in risk mitigation and compliant with all applicable regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and legally compliant screening process that directly addresses patient safety concerns. This involves utilizing a multifaceted approach that includes verifying credentials, conducting criminal background checks, and reviewing professional disciplinary actions, all within the bounds of relevant healthcare regulations and privacy laws. This approach ensures that the organization is proactively identifying potential risks while adhering to established legal and ethical standards for employment screening in the healthcare sector. An incorrect approach that relies solely on a single type of check, such as only a criminal background check, fails to provide a complete picture of an applicant's suitability. This could miss individuals with a history of professional misconduct or license suspension that, while not criminal, could still pose a risk to patient care. Another incorrect approach that involves overly broad or irrelevant background inquiries, such as extensive personal financial history unrelated to job duties, violates applicant privacy and may be discriminatory, leading to legal challenges and reputational damage. Furthermore, an approach that fails to document the screening process or lacks clear criteria for evaluating results creates a risk of inconsistent application and potential bias, undermining the integrity of the hiring process and potentially violating regulatory requirements for due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape governing healthcare employment and background checks within their jurisdiction. This involves identifying all applicable laws and guidelines, such as those pertaining to patient privacy, fair credit reporting, and healthcare professional licensing. Next, they should assess the organization's specific risks and the types of roles being filled to determine the most appropriate screening methods. This assessment should inform the development of a clear, documented policy and procedure for background checks that outlines the scope of inquiries, the criteria for evaluation, and the process for handling discrepancies or adverse findings. Regular review and updates to this policy are essential to ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that the current Employee Training and Awareness Program for Healthcare Security has a low engagement rate and a high rate of successful phishing simulations. Which approach to optimizing this program best aligns with regulatory requirements and best practices for healthcare security? Option A. Focus exclusively on enhancing technical security controls and assume that employee awareness will naturally improve as a result. Option B. Implement a phased rollout of interactive, role-specific training modules that are updated quarterly, coupled with regular, varied phishing simulations and a clear reporting mechanism for suspicious activities. Option C. Reduce the frequency of training to once every 2 years to conserve resources, assuming that employees retain information from previous sessions. Option D. Conduct a single, comprehensive annual training session covering all security topics, with a focus on policy memorization rather than practical application. The correct answer is B. Implement a phased rollout of interactive, role-specific training modules that are updated quarterly, coupled with regular, varied phishing simulations and a clear reporting mechanism for suspicious activities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive employee training on healthcare security with the practical constraints of budget and time. Healthcare organizations are under constant threat from sophisticated cyber attacks and insider threats, making robust security awareness crucial. The challenge lies in designing and implementing a program that is both effective in mitigating risks and sustainable within organizational resources. Careful judgment is required to prioritize training content, delivery methods, and frequency to maximize impact. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk-based security. By regularly assessing the effectiveness of the training program through metrics like phishing simulation, click rates, and incident reporting, the organization can identify areas for improvement. This data-driven approach allows for the optimization of training content and delivery methods to address evolving threats and employee knowledge gaps. This proactive and adaptive strategy is essential for maintaining a strong security posture and complying with regulations that mandate ongoing security awareness training, such as HIPAA security rule, which requires covered entities to implement a security awareness and training program for all workforce members. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach fails because it relies on a one-time, generic training session. This is professionally unacceptable, as it does not account for the dynamic nature of security threats or the varying levels of technical proficiency among employees. Regulations like HIPAA emphasize the need for ongoing training, not a single event. This approach also neglects to measure effectiveness, leaving the organization unaware of whether the training actually improved security awareness or reduced risk. Another incorrect approach is flawed because it focuses solely on technical controls without addressing the human element. Technical safeguards are vital. Many security incidents stem from human error or negligence. A program that neglects employee awareness and behavioral aspects fails to address a significant attack vector and is therefore incomplete and professionally deficient. It also overlooks the regulatory requirement to train the workforce on security policies and procedures. A third incorrect approach is problematic because it prioritizes cost savings over effectiveness by using outdated training materials and infrequent refreshers. This is professionally unacceptable as it creates a false sense of security. Outdated information can be irrelevant or even misleading in the face of current threats, and infrequent refreshers lead to knowledge decay. This approach fails to meet the spirit and intent of regulatory mandates for effective security awareness training. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a cyclical approach to employee training and awareness programs. This involves initial assessment of needs, development of relevant and engaging content, implementation of the training, and crucially, ongoing evaluation and refinement. Metrics should be established to measure the program's impact on employee behavior and the organization's security posture. Regular feedback mechanisms should be incorporated to allow employees to report concerns and suggest improvements. This iterative process ensures that the training remains relevant, effective, and compliant with evolving regulatory requirements and threat landscapes. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that a hospital's emergency department is experiencing a surge in patients due to a local disaster. A patient arrives in critical condition, requiring immediate consultation with an on-call specialist. The attending physician needs to quickly transmit the patient's vital signs, current medications, and a brief summary of their condition to the specialist. What is the most compliant and professionally sound approach to facilitate this urgent information exchange? Option A. Delay treatment and consultation until a secure patient portal can be accessed by both parties. Option B. Send the patient's full medical history via standard, unencrypted email to the specialist's work address. Option C. Transmit the patient's medical information using a secure, encrypted messaging platform specifically approved by the Organization for Patient Data Exchange. Option D. Verbally relay the patient's critical information to the on-call physician without confirming their identity or using a secure communication method. The correct answer is C. Transmit the patient's medical information using a secure, encrypted messaging platform specifically approved by the Organization for Patient Data Exchange. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for patient care with strict adherence to HIPAA regulations regarding the privacy and security of protected health information. 5. Healthcare providers are ethically and legally obligated to protect patient data, but also to ensure continuity of care. The rapid dissemination of information, especially in a critical situation, can inadvertently lead to breaches if not managed through established protocols. The pressure to act quickly can override careful consideration of privacy safeguards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes patient privacy while still enabling necessary communication for care. By utilizing a secure, encrypted communication channel specifically designated for patient information exchange, the organization adheres to HIPAA security rule requirements for safeguarding electronic PHI, E5. This method ensures that only authorized personnel can access the information, minimizing the risk of unauthorized disclosure. It also demonstrates a commitment to the HITECH Act's emphasis on the secure use and disclosure of ePHI. This approach is proactive, compliant, and maintains the integrity of patient data. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves sending the patient's full medical history via standard, unencrypted email. This is a direct violation of HIPAA security rule, which mandates technical safeguards to protect ePHI from unauthorized access or disclosure. Standard email is not considered a secure method for transmitting sensitive health information. Another incorrect approach is to verbally relay the patient's critical information to the on-call physician without confirming their identity or using a secure method. While verbal communication is sometimes necessary, it must be done with appropriate safeguards, such as using a secure phone line or a verified communication system, and ensuring the recipient is authorized to receive the information. This method risks unauthorized disclosure if the call is overheard or intercepted. A third incorrect approach is to delay treatment until a secure portal can be accessed, even if the patient's condition is life-threatening. While privacy is paramount, HIPAA and ethical guidelines allow for disclosures necessary to prevent serious harm to the individual or others. In such a critical situation, the immediate need for life-saving intervention would generally supersede the delay in secure communication, provided that reasonable efforts are made to secure the information as soon as practically possible. However, the chosen incorrect approach is to delay treatment, not to use a less secure method for the immediate emergency. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based approach, always considering the least restrictive means to achieve a necessary outcome while maintaining compliance. In situations involving critical patient care, established emergency protocols should be in place that balance the need for rapid information exchange with privacy safeguards. When such protocols are absent or insufficient, professionals must exercise sound judgment, prioritizing patient safety and well-being while making every reasonable effort to protect PHI. This involves understanding the specific requirements of HIPAA and high-tech, and knowing when exceptions or emergency provisions apply. Question 18. The performance metrics show a significant increase in unauthorized access attempts to restricted areas and a rise in reported security incidents within the healthcare facility over the past quarter. Considering the need to enhance physical security while adhering to healthcare regulations and best practices, which of the following approaches would be the most effective and compliant? Option A. Focus on reinforcing existing physical barriers and implementing more visible signage indicating restricted access. Option B. Significantly increase the number of on-site security guards patrolling all areas of the facility to deter potential intruders and respond to incidents. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive physical security risk assessment to identify specific vulnerabilities and implement a layered security strategy that includes upgrading access control systems, enhancing surveillance in high-risk areas, and reinforcing physical barriers where necessary. Option D. Install advanced surveillance cameras in all patient rooms and common areas to monitor all activities continuously. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive physical security risk assessment to identify specific vulnerabilities and implement a layered security strategy that includes upgrading access control systems, enhancing surveillance in high-risk areas, and reinforcing physical barriers where necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in healthcare security, balancing the need for robust physical security with operational efficiency and patient experience. The performance metrics indicating increased unauthorized access attempts and a rise in reported security incidents, despite existing measures, highlight a critical gap. The challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant physical security enhancements without causing undue disruption or violating patient privacy and accessibility rights, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Healthcare Security Certification, CHS, exam. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a layered security approach that combines technological solutions with procedural enhancements represents best professional practice. This involves a comprehensive risk assessment to identify vulnerabilities and then deploying appropriate controls. For instance, upgrading access control systems to multi-factor authentication for sensitive areas, enhancing surveillance coverage in identified blind spots, and reinforcing physical barriers where necessary, all align with the principles of safeguarding protected health information. 5. And ensuring a secure environment as mandated by relevant healthcare security regulations. This approach is proactive, evidence-based, and addresses the root causes of security breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on increasing the number of security guards without a targeted strategy is inefficient and may not address the specific vulnerabilities identified by the performance metrics. This approach can be costly and may not be as effective as technological solutions in preventing sophisticated breaches. It fails to demonstrate a risk-based approach to security investment. Implementing widespread, intrusive surveillance in all patient care areas without a clear justification based on risk assessment would violate patient privacy rights and potentially contravene regulations concerning patient dignity and confidentiality. Such a broad approach is not a targeted or proportionate response. Relying exclusively on passive security measures like signage and basic locks, while important, is insufficient when performance metrics indicate a rise in actual security incidents. This approach is reactive rather than proactive and does not adequately address the evolving threat landscape or the specific vulnerabilities highlighted by the data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, risk-based approach. This involves 1. Analyzing performance data to identify trends and specific problem areas. 2. Conducting a thorough physical security risk assessment, considering both technological and procedural vulnerabilities. 3. prioritizing security enhancements based on the level of risk and potential impact on patient safety, data security, and operational continuity. 4. Selecting solutions that are compliant with all applicable healthcare regulations, ethical standards, and best practices. 5. Regularly evaluating the effectiveness of implemented measures and adapting as necessary. Question 19. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a more comprehensive, multi-factor authentication system for all remote access points would significantly increase upfront costs by 20% compared to the current single-factor authentication. However, the current system has been flagged in internal audits as a potential vulnerability for unauthorized access to electronic health records, (EHR), due to its susceptibility to credential stuffing attacks. The IT security team recommends the upgrade, citing potential regulatory penalties and reputational damage from a breach. The finance department is hesitant due to the immediate budget increase. What is the most appropriate course of action for the healthcare organization's security leadership? Option A. Implement a partial upgrade to the multi-factor authentication system, only for critical access points, to manage costs while addressing some of the identified vulnerabilities. Option B. Proceed with the current single-factor authentication system, assuming the risk of a breach is low and focusing budget on other operational needs. Option C. Defer the implementation of the multi-factor authentication system and conduct further research into less expensive, alternative security measures that may not offer the same level of protection. Option D. Implement the multi-factor authentication system, prioritizing patient data protection and regulatory compliance over immediate cost savings. The correct answer is D. Implement the multi-factor authentication system, prioritizing patient data protection and regulatory compliance over immediate cost savings. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in healthcare security, where the immediate financial implications of a security measure are weighed against potential risks to patient data and organizational reputation. The challenge lies in balancing fiscal responsibility with the paramount duty to protect sensitive health information, as mandated by regulations. The correct approach prioritizes patient data protection and regulatory compliance, even if it incurs higher upfront costs. This aligns with the core principles of healthcare security, emphasizing the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of protected health information. 5. Best professional practice dictates that the potential harm from a data breach, including regulatory fines, legal liabilities, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust, far outweighs the cost savings of a less robust security solution. Adherence to regulations like HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, in the U.S., which mandates specific security safeguards, is non-negotiable. An incorrect approach that favors the cheaper, less secure option fails to adequately assess and mitigate risks. This demonstrates a disregard for regulatory requirements, potentially leading to violations of data protection laws. Such a decision would be ethically unsound, as it places financial considerations above the fundamental right of patients to have their sensitive information kept secure. It also exposes the organization to significant financial and reputational damage in the event of a breach, negating any initial cost savings. Another incorrect approach might involve delaying the implementation of necessary security upgrades due to budget constraints without a clear, documented risk mitigation plan. This passive approach is also a failure, as it allows known vulnerabilities to persist, increasing the likelihood of a breach and subsequent regulatory penalties. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing the likelihood and impact of a breach, and then evaluating security controls based on their effectiveness in mitigating those risks. When a cost-benefit analysis reveals a significant disparity between the cost of a robust security solution and the potential cost of a breach, the more secure option, even if more expensive, should be pursued. This requires clear communication with leadership about the risks and the rationale for the recommended investment, framing it not as an expense but as a necessary investment in risk management and patient trust. Question 20. Implementation of an emergency preparedness and response plan for a healthcare facility requires a thorough understanding of potential disruptions. Which approach to impact assessment best supports the development of a resilient and effective plan? Option A. An assessment prioritizing only those threats that have historically caused significant damage in the immediate geographic region. Option B, a systematic evaluation of how various disruptive events could affect all critical healthcare functions, including patient care, infrastructure, information systems, and supply chains, to identify cascading effects and vulnerabilities. Option C, a focus on the most frequently occurring minor disruptions to ensure immediate operational continuity for routine issues. Option D, a rapid, qualitative assessment based on anecdotal evidence of past incidents to quickly identify the most obvious risks. The correct answer is B, a systematic evaluation of how various disruptive events could affect all critical healthcare functions, including patient care, infrastructure, information systems, and supply chains, to identify cascading effects and vulnerabilities. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with the long-term strategic imperative of ensuring patient safety and organizational resilience during a crisis. The healthcare environment is dynamic, and the effectiveness of emergency preparedness hinges on a thorough understanding of potential threats and their impact on critical services. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actions that not only address the immediate disruption, but also contribute to a robust and adaptable response capability. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically evaluates the potential consequences of various disruptive events on all essential healthcare functions. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate comprehensive risk assessments and the development of actionable emergency plans. By identifying critical dependencies and vulnerabilities, healthcare organizations can allocate resources effectively, develop targeted mitigation strategies, and ensure continuity of care for patients. This proactive and analytical method is essential for meeting the standards set by healthcare security certifications, which emphasize a data-driven and evidence-based approach to preparedness. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, visible threats without considering cascading effects or less obvious vulnerabilities would be professionally unacceptable. This failure could lead to a plan that is reactive rather than proactive, leaving the organization exposed to unforeseen consequences. For instance, neglecting to assess the impact on IT systems during a natural disaster, or failing to consider the psychological impact on staff during a prolonged outage, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such omissions demonstrate a lack of due diligence in identifying all potential risks and developing comprehensive safeguards, which is contrary to the principles of patient safety and organizational integrity expected in healthcare security. Another incorrect approach might involve prioritizing the most common or frequently occurring threats without adequately considering the severity of less frequent but potentially catastrophic events. This can lead to an imbalanced allocation of resources and a false sense of security. Ethically, this failure could result in a lack of preparedness for high-impact, low-probability events, potentially jeopardizing patient lives when such an event occurs. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive threat and vulnerability assessment, followed by a detailed impact analysis of each identified threat on critical healthcare operations. This analysis should consider direct and indirect impacts, interdependencies, and the potential duration of disruption. Based on this analysis, mitigation strategies and response protocols should be developed, prioritized, and regularly tested. Continuous review and updating of the plan based on lessons learned from exercises, real-world events, and evolving threat landscapes are crucial for maintaining an effective emergency preparedness program.